Driving across America. I have driven throughout most of the country. So, there's, the speed limits, well, it's 55. There are. Do you know how the roads, by the way, this is fascinating. Do you know how the road systems are laid out in the US? Do you know that?
They're laid out. If you know locally where we are here, 95 is the main route. 95 goes from the northern tip of Maine down to the southern tip of Florida, which is the entire eastern seaboard. If the country were a rectangle, which it pretty much is, all interstates ending in odd numbers, 95, 85, 75, 65, 55, going all the way up to I-5, I-5 runs the northern tip of Washington to the southern tip of California.
So, a college friend of mine, on our first venture out, decided we live on, sorta in the middle, which happens to be 70. It's not quite 50 but a little bit farther north, and 70 runs all the way across from, Maryland all the way to California, and we decided we were going to do 70 on 70 miles per hour, that is 80 on 80, 90 on 90, and 100 on 100. And we did it. So we were cruising across country in that manner, and I've been I see. I would say I've been through at least half of the states. And if you drive through Kansas, the first 5 miles is pretty much exactly the same as the next 500 plus miles that you have got to travel to get across it. It's a very long state. What do you like about America?
Yeah. It was the most interesting thing to me, the change of the seasons. I think that is just absolutely. 'Cause I guess as I grew up with just one season. In fact, I shouldn't say 2 seasons, we have the wet season. And the rainy season. But it's summer all year round. And I just love especially fall. I'm a fall person. I love to see the colors, the trees when they, turn those beautiful colors. That's what I like about. And what I like, too, television. Oh. I'm a television nut. I look at television all the time. And in Guyana, we don't see the kind of programs that you have here, so.
So what do you watch?
And, in fact, I watch all Criminal Intent, all of those. Law and Orders.
And what else?
I like game shows, too. I love Jeopardy. I love Jeopardy. Yeah, game shows and Law and Order. Those are my crime stories. I like things like that. Well, as I mentioned, the seasons. We don't have spring, summer, autumn, winter. We have summer all year round.
Right.
Another thing, the traffic here. You just have to contend here with cars and maybe couple bicycles. But in Guyana, you've got to contend with not only the cars, pedestrians, bicyclists, most people ride a bicycle. In Guyana, they don't drive, they ride a bicycle. And there's also something we call a donkey cart, which is something like a flatbed truck, but instead of being pulled by a car like in front, it's pulled by a donkey. And they also have the right of way, too, on the streets, too. So that's something. Every time I go home, I keep wondering, how did I ever drive in Guyana before, because I know for sure I can't drive there now. So.
An island in Maine.
Taiwanese, both parents are from Taiwan, came to the States for graduate school. And then decided to stay both for political reasons and for career reasons. My parents came through, their Ellis Island was Kansas. University or City of Kansas, at Lawrence.
Kansas.
Middle of the country, that was, I guess they were pulling a lot of Taiwanese students at that time, so they came through there for their graduate school, and then a job opportunity opened in Maine, so that's how the family ended up being the only Taiwanese family within a 100-mile radius in Maine.
When did your parents come to the US?
In the 60s, the early 60s.
So how was life, have they talked about? How life was different there versus life here in the US? Have they told you much about that or commented on that, or
Were some aspects of life that were different in the US versus in Taiwan, but I think a lot of the quality of life that we had, or a lot of the specifics of our lifestyle, had to do with living on an island in Maine as opposed to so much being in the US. I wouldn't, I'm old enough now that I think I didn't have a typical upbringing. I didn't live in a typical American town. It was just so much smaller, but at the same time it was inundated every summer by millions of tourists from all over the world, so we lived in a sort of interesting balance between being a super isolated small town, middle of nowhere, no traffic lights on the entire island existence, and then having this center of the spotlight world destination for vacationers. Which is an interesting mix. The island is sort of split into two. I lived on what they called the quiet side of the island, the western side, so that wasn't developed as a tourist destination until the last decade. The eastern side is where Bar Harbor is, all these sort of big tourist areas, so that's always been a big tourist destination since, from the last century in the 1800s. So we could always in some sense retreat back to our quiet side of the island, and it wasn't crazy the whole summer thanks to that. But why you could still feel a palpable difference between the way that life was in the summer and the way that it was in the rest of the year.
or did you enjoy living on the quieter side?
I did. I'm glad I lived on the quiet side. It's a little bit crazy with all the tourists